The clay has a negative electronic charge, and most free radicals, heavy metals, toxins, and poisons have a positive charge. Just because, opposites attract, the clay with its negative charge can pull out toxins, poisons, heavy metals, free radicals, and detoxify. So that's one of the reasons that the clay help. Another is the clay is very alkaline, and most of us are too acidic. A lot of diseases like to live in a acidic environment. The clay being very alkaline helps us be more alkaline. Another reason is the clay has some 70 trace minerals. And most of us, because of the diets we have, environments today, most of us don't really get as many beneficial minerals as our ancestors.
Welcome to the Deconstructing Conventional podcast. This interview is brought to you by Healing United, a private membership association committed to helping you reclaim sovereignty over your health, life, and future. You could say our tagline is question everything and rebuild intentionally. In the audio format of the show, there's additional commentary before each episode, and there are also over a dozen audio-only episodes. You can find the show anywhere you listen to podcasts, including the Healing United PMA app. Look for it in the App Store. And if you want to learn more about the work we do, and especially how we help people heal when the doctors have no answers, visit us online at healingunited.today. Now, on with the show. All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's show. My guest is Mr. Neal Bosshardt. So let me tell you a little bit about this amazing man. He was born and raised in Redmond, Utah. He graduated from Snow College and then went to Brigham Young University, where he got a degree in business management. And so in 1974, he returned to Redmond to work in the family business, and he worked there until he retired in 2018. And he worked in every aspect of the Redmond Life business. He worked in from mining to packaging to marketing, and he was involved with all of the products from table salt to livestock salt to de-icing salt, and he helped them expand their markets from strictly the Western United States to the entire US and into Canada, New Zealand, and Japan. And his passion is teaching people the medicinal benefits of unrefined salt and natural clay. And even though he's retired, he loves teaching classes about salt and clay because they have helped him keep himself and his family out of emergency rooms and doctor's offices and drugstores so many times. And he kind of now feels like he would be derelict in his duty if he didn't continue to share what he's learned. And to that end, he was recently featured as a speaker at the Wise Traditions Conference in 2025. So Neal and his wife, Marcia, have 8 children and 28 grandchildren. Wow. And when he is not teaching classes on natural salt and clay, he enjoys making sauerkrauts and composts and working in the garden and spending time with family, which to me sounds like the good life right there, Neal. So thank you so much for coming on the show and for taking the time.
It is. And thank you, Christian. And to be totally honest, asking me to talk about natural clay is like asking an old person to talk about their grandchildren.
Good. I have a lot of questions, so I can't wait for you to talk about this.
I've been blessed with the opportunity. Clay came into our lives 50 years ago, and certainly was a blessing. And I'd like to see it be able to help others like it's helped our family.
Great. Okay. Well, before we get into just some of the uses of it, how did you become a guru for clay? How did it help you when maybe conventional medicine couldn't? And let's just go from there.
Well, that's an interesting story. So back in the 70s, our family had a bentonite clay deposit, and we were selling it for lining ponds, and just for agricultural purposes, lining ponds, cattle feed. But the health food people came to us in the early 1970s with a book entitled "Our Earth is Our Cure." It was written by a French homeopath, and in this book, Raymond Dextrate, the author, says that certain clays have medicinal properties. He goes on to say that there's as many kinds of clays as there are breeds of dogs. Some clays have medicinal properties, some don't. Some work better, some don't work as well. And the health food people who brought us this book wanted to know if the clay that we had there on the property had medicinal properties. We didn't know. We had never eaten it, never intended to eat it. But these people showing us this book said this French homeopath in his book, he said that the right kind of clay would bring the body into balance. It would do one thing for you, but something else for me. That it would help diarrhea, constipation, and everything in between. Well, they wanted to buy it and eat it. we said it's not for sale, not if you're going to eat it. I called the FDA in Denver and I said, there's some crazy idiots over here who want to eat our dirt. What should we be concerned about? And so they gave me a list: lead, mercury, arsenic, chromium, beryllium, everything, streptococcus, staphylococcus, E. coli. We had it tested for everything. And the result came back, it's inert. The guy at the FDA said it won't hurt a soul. He also said it won't help a soul, which didn't surprise us. So with the assurance that it wasn't going to kill anybody, we made it available for sale. And then because it was there on the shelf, waiting for somebody to buy it, and very few people did, only those couple of health food stores. But as it was on the shelf, and as our family encountered medical conditions that conventional medicine couldn't fix, in desperation, we turned to the clay, as directed by Raymond Dextrate. And the first situation, there was a gal, she was pregnant due to the iron in the prenatal vitamins. She was so constipated, she was having one bowel movement every week or 10 days. And she tried through diet to get her bowels to work. That didn't help. So in desperation, she and her husband tried the clay, as directed by this book, which is a teaspoon in a glass of water. Well, in 3 days, her bowels were normal. Wow. And so we thought, well, what do you know? Old Dextrate got one thing right. Give him that. But a few months later, our grandmother's neighbor, we learned, had diarrhea so bad it would be down both legs and in her shoes before she could even get out of the church or the store or the post office to go home. So we gave Grandma some clay for her neighbor, and a week later, that little lady was came to see us, and with tears running down her face, she just thanked me for this product. She hugged me like I was her grandson, and this was, 50 years ago. So I looked like a grandson. Today I look like the grandfather. But I said, don't thank me. This isn't our creation. God created this product. We were just blessed to learn about it. And with tears in her eyes, she just said, you don't know. You just don't know how good it is to go out in public again without fear of embarrassment. Yeah. So diarrhea, constipation, we thought, wow. So little by little, whenever conventional medicine would fail, in desperation, we would turn to the clay. And it worked so well that eventually it became our first aid kit and then our medicine cabinet. And I'm not a wild-eyed radical. We appreciate doctors for what they can do. But if you got a product that works better than what the doctors have, that's more available, that's certainly cheaper, and most important, more effective, why not use it?
Right.
So that's how we got into the clay.
Right on. Okay. Well, before we get to some of the practical uses of clay and some of the fascinating stories or shocking pictures you sent me, give us some perspective on maybe the historical uses of clay. So your family obviously wasn't the first to figure this out, and so many people have been using it throughout history. So dial us in a little bit on what you've learned over the years about how humans have used clay for a long time.
Oh, yeah. Clay has been used medicinally since, I'd say, the beginning of time. There's documentation that, Aristotle, Hippocrates, the doctors of antiquity used clay. There's documentation that shows that in the First World War, soldiers on both sides of the conflict were issued clay as part of their rations. And those regiments that had clay never were devastated by the diarrhea and the cholera that ravaged other units. And so, since the beginning of time and even currently, there's NASA has done some studies on clay that is fascinating. Years ago, back in the 1980s, my parents went to Guatemala as senior missionaries for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Mm-hmm. And as senior missionaries in Guatemala, they were known as the mission doctors. Any new missionaries, any people struggling with the getting climatized to the food and the water and the parasites and that's they encountered there in Guatemala, they would bring those sick missionaries to my parents, who would give them a glass or two of clay water, and that was it. So it resolved those issues. So well that, like I say, they became known as the mission doctors.
Wow. Okay. Well, I've even heard Marco Polo and Egyptians and Native Americans and others, even Gandhi's recommended it. There's so many different types of clay. And really, before we had magic potions of pharmaceuticals today, we had earth and we had plant medicinals, and that was medicine. And sure enough, they figured out how to use it. So you mentioned earlier that there's as many types of clay as there are breeds of dog. So my understanding is the type of that you use is called bentonite clay. Is that correct?
Yes, it is. But even then, and that's the reason why, you know, no one has done enough research to totally document all the advantages of clay. In fact, well, Raymond Dextrate, in his book, he said that mankind was not smart enough to ever determine how natural clay, can do what it does. He said, for those people who won't use it till they have the science, they'll never use it because mankind is not smart enough. Now, there are a lot of tests on the clay, but the problem with the clay, again, is, and geologists will tell you this, clay is one of the hardest substances to classify and quantify because there are so many differences. You know, a lot of people say, well, hey, my garden's clay. Can I just go out and eat my garden dirt? No. The clay that we have, or the clay that I've used for 50 years, yes, it is a bentonite clay. Its source is volcanic ash. The geologists say that this bentonite was volcanic ash that fell in seawater. And they say that when volcanic ash falls in seawater, it acquires different properties than when it falls in fresh water or falls out on the land. So you might say that, you know, clay is a huge family of soils that have different properties. Well, in the clay family, you have bentonite, which has certain properties, and then you also have montmorillonite. Now, those two items are basically the same. When they found a substance that had these properties in Montmoril, France, they called it montmorillonite. When they found a similar substance, geological deposit in Fort Benton, Wyoming, they called it bentonite. But in the bentonite family, so bentonite and montmorillonite are often the words are used interchangeably, but in the bentonite family, you have sodium bentonites and calcium bentonites. You have high swelling bentonites, low swelling bentonites. And so there's so many different variations that's why it's so impossible to say, well, you know, okay, this is bentonite, it'll do this and this and this. Well, it depends on what type of bentonite it is. And again, the variations are so minor and yet maybe significant. And that's why nobody is willing or able to spend the millions of dollars to identify exactly the properties that make it work. So Dextrate, in his book, he said, find a clay, and he said, you know, and it's the bentonites and montmorillonites that are more effective as far as medicinally. But he said, find a clay that works. If it doesn't work, find another clay. If it does work, be grateful and use it.
Got it. Okay. Are there any types of clay that you would say definitely don't use that? And you mentioned don't dig up clay in your backyard and ingest that. But like, is there any other parameter you put around narrowing in on the type of clay people would most benefit from?
Yeah, you definitely want a bentonite or montmorillonite.
Okay.
And you want to make sure that it's not contaminated, you know, with other, you know, substances. If that bentonite came near a mine, you know, a lead and zinc mine, where there, you know, could be, you know, contamination, yeah, you know, you want to make sure it's safe. So it's best to have it analyzed, make sure that it doesn't have any of the harmful things that, you know, the lead, the mercury, and depending on where it came from, it could have some of that. But you want a high quality bentonite or montmorillonite.
Okay, that's a good summary and some good guidance around if you're going to experiment, have a little testing done before to make sure something you don't want isn't in there.
Exactly.
Okay, got it. Well, let's get a little bit more just into, you mentioned it's hard for man to even know what's what clay is doing for us, but as best we can. So you told a story of your dad going as a missionary and then realizing some of the medicinal potential clay had, and then he ended up coming back and funding a study to use clay for dysentery. So tell people about what that study found, and it was kind of that kind of the beginning of the way you've been using it.
You bet. So when my father came home from Guatemala, he went to a major university because he wanted to be able to go back to Guatemala with the clay to help those people. The leading cause of death in infants in Guatemala under the age of 5 is dysentery. If children can live till the age of 5, they've developed the immunity that they need to go on, usually to adulthood. But so many infants die just as young children before they develop that immunity. So he went to a major university, gave them a chunk of money to do a study on the clay as an antidiarrheal. And it was the best antidiarrheal that this researcher had ever seen. He was blown away. And why he said it worked so well is the clay had the ability of absorbing the toxins that the bacteria that were causing the diarrhea were emitting. They tested it with cholera toxin and aflatoxin, and he said that bacteria put out a toxin that creates an environment to where then that bacteria can thrive, and it keeps the body's beneficial bacteria away. So it creates a protected turf for that strain of bacteria. Well, because the clay was effective in absorbing 95% of the toxins that the bacteria were emitting, then that bacteria couldn't proliferate. It couldn't like normal. And so then the body's natural defenses came in and took over, and health resulted. So they did that study. It was in a lab, in vitro. And so then the plan was to take it to do another study with rats, animals. But without the money of a drug company, the family didn't have the funds to fund that in vivo study. And so it ended there. One of the researchers, one of the people who were part of that research, he's now a medical doctor, full-blown medical doctor. And last year we were talking about this study, and he said it's so sad he said when he was in college and doing that study, he learned the effectiveness of natural bentonite clay as an antidiarrheal. And he saw its potential, but now as a medical doctor, he sees the problem that to take that product and bring it to mainstream medicine, he says, now I understand that the costs are just so prohibitive for a natural substance that can never be patented.
Yeah. I think I have that quote from your book. Is he the same guy that said, I heard the quote here is, how much research on an ulcer medication can a company do for $8 per patient versus $2,190 per patient? There's no economic future in trying to promote that. Is that the same guy?
Yeah, that was that was a different guy. Different.
Okay.
He wasn't a doctor, but the story you're telling there is a coworker, one of my coworkers, heard these people talking about how much the clay helped for ulcers, and her husband had been on medicine for 3 years, had been taking a medicine for 3 years, costing him $2 a day for 3 years, and they figured he'd be on that medicine the rest of his life. And so his wife took him home a bottle of clay, cost her $10. And 3 weeks, within just a very short time, I began hearing her tell people of what it had done for her husband's ulcers. And 6 months later, I ran into him, bumped into him at the post office, and I said, hey, I've heard your wife's story on your ulcer. I'd like to hear it first person from you. And he said, Neal, that clay did more in 3 weeks than the medicine had done in 3 years. And I said, so do you still take the clay? And he said, no, I don't have to. Unless I'm going to eat something that really tears up my stomach, then I'll take the clay and I have no problem.
Wow. Okay. Well, I'm going to put a disclaimer in here just so we have this on record. So there's nothing that about clay that has been blessed by the FDA with an approval for anything related to health. So I would say follow the money, but remember, nothing in this show is intended to be personal health advice. And if you experiment with anything we talk about, you're doing so at your own risk. But before we leave the um, properties of clay or how it may be helping, you also mentioned in one of your videos that you talked about clay having a particular negative charge, and most toxins have a positive charge. So talk a little bit about that potential as well.
Yeah, Christian, I appreciate you bringing that up because even though this French homeopath said man is never be smart enough to determine all the reasons why clay works, there are some reasons.
Hmm.
Uh, Basically, probably the most important, the clay has a negative electronic charge. And most free radicals, heavy metals, toxins, and poisons have a positive charge. So just because, opposites attract, the clay with its negative charge can pull out toxins, poisons, heavy metals, free radicals, and detoxify. So that's one of the reasons that the clay help. Another is the clay is very alkaline. And most of us are too acidic and can't, well, a lot of diseases like to live in a acidic environment. The clay being very alkaline helps us be, more alkaline. Another reason is the clay has some 70 trace minerals. And most of us, because of diets we have, our environments today, most of us don't really get as many beneficial minerals as, our ancestors did. So with the complex variety of minerals, with the high alkalinity level, and with the ability, the negative charge, which has the ability of absorbing toxins, those are three reasons why it makes sense that the clay has these properties.
Well, and why it can influence such a breadth of different types of health situations too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, yeah. So, and it's interesting. Like I say, from diarrhea to constipation,
Yeah, that one surprised me.
how can it bring the body into balance? I don't know, but it
Okay.
does.
Yeah. Right. Okay. Well, on this disclaimer or this sciencey part of it, have you ever, in your 50 years of using clay, have you ever seen a negative side effect other than maybe taking too much and getting constipated?
Never. We've never seen an allergic reaction. We've never seen a negative side effect. Uh, the worst thing that we've ever seen happen is nothing. Now,
Terrible.
now people are different. And so, like you say, this certainly isn't a guarantee. Uh, and yeah, and I don't sell clay. I don't sell. Sometimes people say, well, I want to buy some clay. I say, fine, go find somebody who sells it. If I sell clay and I tie it to a specific product, that's making a drug claim. That's practicing medicine without a license. And so I don't sell clay. I educate. I educate. I sell a book that talks about clay, but people have to go out and find their own.
All right. Well, there we go. Okay, so let's talk uh, uses then. There's two main ways to use clay. There's externally and internally. So I guess we'll take them in that order. But externally, I'll give the listeners a short list of some of the health situations that you've seen improved with clay, and then I'd say dramatically improved. And then we'll tell some stories, look at some pictures, and some of which are kind of shocking, and then just talk about how people might be able to use it. So here is a list for the listener or the viewer of some of the things that where clay can assist the body with healing. So we've got burns, spider bites, scrapes, cuts, and open wounds, including major lacerations. And wait till you see some of those pictures. Removing splinters. Yeah, go ahead.
I hope you give a warning before you put up
Yes.
that one.
Yeah. If you're squeamish, you may not want to see some of these pictures. So, other things that can help with are removing splinters, glass, rocks, and plastics out from under the skin, hernias, which that was a surprising one to me, diaper rashes, eczema, shingles, and pain and swelling, tooth decay, tooth infections, or canker sores, cracked ribs, bruises, earaches, and swollen glands, the healing of new or fresh scars, acne, athlete's foot, gout, and ingrown toenails. And that's not the entire list. So let's just go through some of the things that you've seen heal externally. So give us some stories. Maybe tell us the one about the little girl who burned her hand on a stove.
Oh, yeah. And this one's close to my heart because, if an adult gets burned, adults can deal with burns better than children. My heart cries for children who get burned. So many years ago, a friend, her 4-year-old daughter wanted to help her mother cook dinner. And of course, mom was busy saying, not tonight, I'm busy. Well, mom turns off the stove and takes the pan and heads for the kitchen table. But out of the corner of her eyes, she saw her little 4-year-old pushing a stool over toward the stove. Well, she knew what was going to happen. And so she quickly set down the pan, was running back, got back there, but not in time. The little girl, trying to pull herself up onto this stool, put her hand on the hot plate to pull herself up onto the stool. Her mother got there in time to pull her hand back, but not in time, and every ring of the hot plate left a blistered line across the fingers and the palm. But on the heel of the hand where the little girl had put the most weight, the flesh came off and was stuck on her smooth top range. Luckily, this lady had clay. So she takes her little girl, steps to the sink, and runs water on it. Now, on a burn, you always want to run water on it first to get the heat out. But after running water on it for a few minutes, they buried that little girl's hand in the clay mud. Now to use the clay, and maybe we'll talk about this later at some point, Kristen, we need to talk, how you use the clay.
Right, we'll get to that. I've got it for later.
Yeah, it should be about like mayonnaise or mustard, a gel. So she just buried this little girl's hand in that gel, the clay gel, and then she sat down in a rocking chair with this little girl who's just screaming her lungs out. Her little girl was asleep in her arms within 15 minutes. Not just had quit crying, was asleep. So she got up and took a bread sack and slipped a bread sack or plastic bag over the hand and up the arms so that it couldn't dry out, couldn't get wiped off. Because on a burn, you don't want the clay to dry. You want it to stay moist, and a plastic bag does that. So she put a plastic bag over the hand, went in later in her bed, wondering if they should call the doctor, if she should go to the ER. And her husband said, hey, she's asleep. You never wake a sleeping baby. Let's just wait till she wakes up. Well, that little 4-year-old girl never woke up all night, slept through the night, in spite of the fact that after she was in bed, her mother took a spatula out there, scraped her flesh off from the stove and threw it in the garbage can. The next morning, the little girl comes to her mother, not in tears or in pain, just asking her mother, well, can we take this bag off my hand? She was oblivious as to what had even happened. And her mother said, no, you have to leave that on there today. After breakfast, she saw her little girl riding her bike with both hands on the handlebars. That night, 24 hours after the accident, the mother couldn't stand it. She said, I had to see the hand. Took her in the bathroom, took the bag off, washed the hand, and never did another thing to it. And I saw that hand 2 days later, and I'd heard the story. And when I saw this little 4-year-old coming up the sidewalk, I said, hey, let me see this hand. She sticks her little hand out, no blisters, no lines, nothing on the finger or palm, but on the heel of the hand where the flesh had come off, there was a line of pink skin. No scab, no scar, just pink skin. Now, that was a little 4-year-old girl who was burned. My neighbor, and this is in a picture. Should we wait?
Yeah, I can bring him up if you want me to. We can talk about that because you got spider bites and burns and all sorts of stuff.
Yeah, well, let's follow your schedule, and they'll just.
Okay, yeah. Well, let's go there because the next one I wanted you to tell is just kind of the idea of venoms, or in this case, brown recluse spider bites. You have experience helping people recover from those. There was one story you told about somebody who the doctor said, well, that couldn't have been a spider bite because they don't heal that fast. So tell that story, and then we'll bring up some pictures.
Okay, and I don't have a picture of that brown recluse bite. I've got pictures of another, but not that one. But yeah, it was my friend, her neighbor had been bitten on the arm by a brown recluse. And when my neighbor when my friend saw the neighbor's arm, she said there was most of the arm looked like it had suffered a 3rd-degree burn. But in the center of the arm, there was a circle of flesh, about a 3-inch diameter crater, she called it, of flesh, and it looked like raw hamburger from the grocery store. And she said, oh, it looks like that would hurt. And he said, you don't know what pain is. He said, they've been having me keep it covered for 2 weeks, and it's not getting any better. So now they're having me leave it uncovered to see if it will get better. So she told him about the clay. So they put a big layer of clay, 1/2-inch thick layer of the clay gel on there, and then they wrapped it with an ACE bandage. Because on a wound or an infection, you want it to dry, because as it dries, it will suck, it will draw. And so they covered it with an ACE bandage, and he said his pain level went from a 10 to a 2 within 20 minutes. And then twice a day, he would take off the ACE bandage, stick his arm under the faucet of the kitchen sink, and wash off the clay. And any clay that washed off. Any clay that stuck down inside that crater in that hamburger type flesh, he just left and put on new clay and ACE bandage. So he changed it twice a day for a week. And 1 week later, it was 90% healed. And he went back to the doctor, thinking the doctor would be excited and want to know what he did. And he showed the doctor, and the doctor looked at it and said, well, now we know it wasn't a brown recluse. And this guy, he said, I just about decked him. He said, I wanted to punch his lights out. He said, Doc, what do you mean? You've been treating this thing for 2 weeks as a brown recluse. And the doctor just shook his head and said, brown recluse bites can't heal like that. It must not have been a brown recluse.
Right. Rather than change his paradigm, he had to just, somehow we missed it the first time. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let me pull up the picture you have, because you got a spider bite on someone's toe that you sent me. That was a fascinating picture. So I'll let you kind of talk us through here. So this is kind of, well, you take the timeline.
Okay. So this is a lady who was bitten on the toe by a brown recluse spider. She was treated by a doctor, but the doctor really had never had any experience treating brown recluse bites. On the right-hand picture, there's a blue ink dot on the foot showing how far the infection had traveled up the foot at that point.
Yeah.
Let's go to another.
For the listener, you've got maybe the size of a dime circle, and then it's growing. It's more like the size of a quarter. And so we're just kind of progressing through how this healed.
Mm-hmm. And you can see that the bite originally was only on one toe, but the infection, as it moved not only up the leg, it also moved into the adjoining toes. Yeah. And so at this point, this lady, all the toes, 3 of those toes looked really bad. And at this point, she was on full bed rest with her foot elevated, trying to drive the poison into the rest of her body. They were hoping that if the poison dissipated through the rest of her body, that she wouldn't lose 1 or more of those toes.
And this is all before starting clay. So she's got one bite on one toe to spread to 3, and then we're 11 days in.
Yes, 11 days. And at this point, like I say, she's excruciating pain, full bed rest, out of work. And so her neighbor shows up with a bottle of clay gel, mud, and says he'd like to pack her foot in it. And initially, she was going to say, no way on earth is mud going to touch this wound. But because she had no quality of life, because she was in pain and out of work, in full bed rest, she thought, I'm going to try it. And so she let him pack her foot in the clay, and then they wrapped it with fabric and then a big sock to hold it in place. She said within 15 minutes, she felt something exciting going on inside her foot. And Christian, I've never had anything exciting
in my foot
going on inside my foot. So I don't know what she meant by that, but that was her words. Something exciting began to happen in her foot. My guess is it was the increased circulation.
Yeah,
was beginning to carry that infection away. And so they changed it twice a day, and within a few days, within a day, it looked better, and every day it looked better, and it totally healed, and she still has all 5 toes on that foot. She says, thanks to the clay.
Yeah, we're at 25 days, and then we go to 4 months later, and you can barely tell anything ever happened, and there's a little discoloration, but it's like a whole new foot. I can imagine how bad that was. So you've got some other pictures in here, and some, like we said, they may be hard to look at. So if you're watching this, you may want to look away or fast forward. But this is one I thought was fascinating: a broken ankle with infected pins. So tell people this story.
And this picture, certainly isn't bad. So if you turned away, you can come back and look at this. So this lady broke her ankle, and they had to pin the ankle, which is fine. But then those pins got infected. And so she was in and out of the wound clinic twice a week for 4 months.
Yeah.
And all during those 4 months, her sister-in-law, who had had some amazing experiences with clay healing other wounds, was begging her to pack it in clay. And again, it's so counterintuitive to put mud on an open wound. And yes, Christian, we don't want people putting just any mud on an open wound, but when that mud is, a high quality bentonite clay, she just said, no way on earth is mud going to touch this wound. Mm-hmm. But after 4 months, the wound clinic began to talk to her about amputations to prepare her mentally to become an amputee, because the infection had gone from the pins into the bone.
Geez.
And so they said, we're likely going to have to remove your foot to save your life. And when they started talking amputations, this lady called her sister-in-law and said, hey, I'm more open-minded today. I'd like to hear about that clay again.
Yeah.
Well, they packed it in clay, and within a week, it went from an ugly, dark, ugly wound to a very minor kind of a wound. And then 3 weeks later to even less. And her last email to me said, thanks to the clay, I still have a foot.
Yeah. So another great story there. So here's some where we may get to some of the more difficult ones to look at. So, but this is a major open wound gash, like laceration type of thing. So, talk us through this one. If you're,
close your eyes if you're squeamish.
Yeah. So
okay,
go ahead.
So, it's interesting, and I feel like the Lord's hand is in this product. There's so many people who, in desperation, have been inspired to use or look for clay. We could spend our whole time just on that, on how inspiration has come. But this fellow, he was in a class I taught in Pennsylvania on the medicinal uses of natural clay. And in the class, I told him what I'll probably tell you folks today, and that is everybody should have a quart bottle of the gel clay mixed up, ready to use in their kitchens in case there's an accident, so that you don't have to prepare the clay. You don't have to mix it up as a gel after the accident. Well, a month later, this fellow remembered the class and remembered hearing that I had said you really ought to have a bottle of clay gel in your kitchen. So he mixed one up. And 1 week later, he caught his leg between two pieces of equipment and ripped a hole in his leg. That he just, when he called me on the phone, he said, I've got a 4-inch cut on my leg. Of course, I'm thinking of
that's a minor way to describe that. Wow.
Yeah. He said a 4-inch cut. I pictured, what a butcher knife would do, and so my first words were, well, has it cut any tendons or ligaments? And he said, no, I think it's just in the soft muscle. He didn't bother to tell me that it was 3 inches wide and 2 inches deep. Right. His aunt told me later that you could have put a small lemon down inside the hole this created. But anyway, because of the class he'd been to a month before, he had this bottle of clay gel that he had mixed up just a week before. And so he packed his leg in that gel. He filled the hole with the gel, the surrounding areas with the gel, a good thick layer, and then he wrapped it with vet wrap, which is like an ace bandage. And then he changed it twice a day. This picture's, so there was a picture there, day 10.
Yep, day 10.
So that's day 10 after the accident. The first picture was day 3, and this is 17. So this is like 2 weeks after.
It's now, significantly smaller.
For the first 2 weeks, he changed it twice a day. And as he would take off the vet wrap, the ace bandage, the clay would kind of just lift away from the wound like a patty of Play-Doh. And if it didn't all lift out of the hole, he would just take his finger and just kind of flip it out, rinse the hole with saline solution, and then pack it in clay again. So he changed it twice a day for the first 2 or 3 weeks, and then once a day from thereafter. And it healed. Within a month, he was back to work. And within 2 months, it was basically healed down to the size of my finger. And this is that's 2 months. And then 1 year later, it's a scar.
It just looks like a scar. It's like, I don't know, maybe an inch or more of a scar.
Yeah. One thing that's interesting, I help an organization to provide medical care in Pakistan, and we had donated them some money because they're very efficient. You know, you have to be careful anytime you start donating money to an organization. The first question is how much reaches the people and how much is wasted in overhead or some, you know, CEO's retirement fund. But this company is very efficient, and so we had been giving them some money. But I realized that how I could really help them is to tell them about the clay. And because this organization is funded by a group of doctors, they let me do a presentation to some members of their board. And now we're talking medical doctors. I didn't want to appear as a wild-eyed radical. So I said, now, I showed them these pictures, showed them all the pictures. And then I said, now, if this had been me, I would have gone to the hospital. But look what this guy did with nothing but clay. And this doctor looked at me and he said, Neal, going to the hospital would have been a big mistake. He said, this healed better the way with clay than going to the hospital. If he had gone to the hospital, they would have pulled that flap of skin back up out of that hole, and they would have sewn it back where it came from, and creating a warm, dark, moist cavity. He said, this man would have fought infection like no other. He said, there's two keys to healing a wound. One is prevent infection. The other is keep it moist. You did both. Or he did both. He said the clay does both. The clay prevents infection because every time you change it, which is, like say, twice a day for this fellow for the first 2 weeks, 3 weeks, every time you change it, the infection is drawn away. Yeah. And the fact that the clay has this negative charge, it's absorbing the infection and the toxins. And he said the other key to heal a wound is to keep it moist. He said the clay did that. The clay prevented infection, kept it moist. He said this healed better than if he had gone to the hospital. Dang. I believe it. And that's just a testament to an open-minded doctor who can't argue with a result like that. That's awesome. Yeah. But again, you know, we don't want to put anybody's life in danger. So, you know, people are different. Situations are different. This man had the knowledge and ability to take care of it with clay. Yeah. I don't want anybody putting their health at risk. So if in doubt, if you're more comfortable seeing a doctor, do it. Yeah. Okay. Good. Protect yourself. Advice there. Yep. Okay. Well, another one you had that was story that was fascinating. We don't have a picture for was your wife's sewing accident. So tell people that one. And again, Christian, I feel so bad. You know, I mean, there's so many stories I wish that we had pictures for, but back in the day, we didn't think about pictures. We just said, hey, grab the clay. Yeah. So the story, my wife is a seamstress. She sews beautifully, and she was sewing costumes for our local middle school one night. And she was sewing this pom-poms on this white fabric for a school play. And she had just gotten a new sewing machine. And this new sewing machine was a lot faster than her old one. So as she's flipping pom-poms out of the way as they approach the needle, she flipped a pom-pom just right to be wrong. And her finger went under the needle of the sewing machine. Oh. I was in the kitchen. I heard her yelp. I went to the sewing room, and there she was sitting at the table. She had her finger in her mouth so she wouldn't bleed on this white fabric. I knew what had happened because there on the sewing table, I saw 2 pieces of the needle. When the needle hit the bone, hit her finger, it shattered the needle. And of course, as it did, you know, she jerked her finger, you know, back, and she took her finger out of her mouth, and there was this big inch-long, ragged red line. Blood began to come out, and she said, "Give me the clay," and immediately stuck her finger back in her mouth. Well, I went to our jar of clay. I went to the kitchen where we have this quart mason jar of the clay gel that lives there 24/7, 365 days a year, has since 1975. And I grabbed a sandwich bag and a plastic spoon, and I took a big spoonful of that gel out of the quart jar, put it in the corner of the Ziploc sandwich bag. And then I went into the sewing room, and my wife went from her mouth right into the corner of that sandwich bag. And we nestled it in that big tablespoon gob of clay. We put a loose twisty tie above her finger to hold it in place. And then she went back to sewing because these were costumes that had to be ready for the morning dress rehearsal. Well, I'm in the kitchen 20 minutes later making a phone call, and she came in to get a drink of water. And as she picks up the glass, has it under the faucet. She's filling her glass. I said, honey, how's your finger? And just as nonchalantly as can be, she says, it doesn't hurt. I didn't believe her. I donate blood 4 or 5 times a year, and that pricked finger, that will sting for an hour. Her finger was ripped open. And so when she said it doesn't hurt, I thought, you are being macho. You're just, and I said, honey, do you mean it doesn't hurt, or do you mean it's not excruciating? And she held up her finger and she said, Neal, I feel no pain whatsoever in that finger.
Wow.
And so she got her drink. She went back to sewing. She finished the costumes. She went to bed that night with this sandwich bag of clay over her finger, slept through the night, pain-free. The next day, she didn't want to go to the school to this dress rehearsal with that on her finger. So she took that bag off. She put a daub of clay on her finger that a Band-Aid would cover. She wasn't out of the house. She wasn't in the car 3 minutes. And her finger began to throb and to pound. And she said she stood over there in the dress rehearsal with her hand just as high as she could hold it. And the teacher would keep saying, Marcia, do you have a question? And she would say, no, keep going. As soon as they didn't need her, she zipped right home, buried her finger in the clay gel, and again, no pain. And she kept it there for the next 24 hours, and it was gone. So that's a story for all the women who are watching this. But I want to tell the guys a story.
Oh, please do.
Here's your man story. And again, no picture, because we didn't do pictures in those days. But one night I was helping the house across the street from us with a broken broken sewer pipe. And I learned that night that a broken PVC can be as sharp as a ceramic knife.
Yep.
And I learned that when this broken sewer pipe sliced my finger, and it cut the skin, and it just laid the skin back. It didn't cut it off. It just sliced it, laid it open. And I'm a Boy Scout. I know how to take care of bleeding. I pushed that flap of skin back in place, and with direct pressure, I had the bleeding stopped probably within 3 or 4, 5 minutes. But then I thought of the raw sewage that had come out of that pipe, and I thought, maybe I should do more than just stop the bleeding. So I went across the street to my house, got a big tablespoon of the clay gel, put it in a corner of a Ziploc sandwich bag, just like I'd done for my wife, buried my finger in it, loose twisty tie above the knuckle, and went back. By the time I got across the street to help, there was no pain coming from that finger. And I kept it in the clay. I changed it, twice a day, but I kept it in the clay for probably 36, maybe 48 hours. Never hurt again. And there's no scar. I can't find a scar.
Wow. Somehow we have to add Painkiller to this list of things that it does too, because I don't know how it does that, but that's amazing.
Hey, let me tell you this one. So just 3 months ago, a lady who, well, now she's a friend. I didn't know her at the time. She cut her thumb off with a pruning shear, an electric pruning shear. And they took her and her thumb to the hospital in separate vehicles. In the hospital, they sewed it back on. And in the hospital, they used medical leeches to restore or help the circulation.
I didn't know they still used that.
What's that?
I didn't know they still used leeches.
Oh, yes. They use medical leeches, and they're effective. They're very, very good. One of the better ideas maybe the doctors have
not abandoned, yeah.
Yeah, but anyway, so in the hospital, they used medical leeches, but after 3 or 4 days in the hospital, they sent her home to recover. On the way home, she learned about clay and went to packing it in clay. She said and then wrapped it with fabric, cloth, so that it could dry from the mayonnaise consistency when she put it on to Play-Doh consistency, which is, 8 or 10 hours later. She said with the clay on there, she could feel the circulation pulsing just like when they had medical leeches on there.
Huh.
And amazing story. Yeah, it healed phenomenally well.
Man, okay, well, I got 2 other things
Wait.
Okay, go ahead.
But why I told you that is because she said not only did it help the circulation and help her hand heal, but she said it was a better pain reliever than oxycodone. She had been on oxycodone, and the clay, she said, for pain relief, better than oxycodone.
Wow. That's amazing. Yeah, I'm glad I let you get that nugget out because that's important. Okay, well, two other things related to external use I wanted to ask. This hernia thing fascinates me. So give me a story or two about how people have used clay to help with the hernia.
Hey, it's interesting what the clay can do to the body uh, for wounds, and it stimulates the body. I'll just throw this in there. Women who have painful monthly menstrual cramps, they will put a poultice of clay gel on whichever side was painful, and it reduces pain from that monthly menstruation period phenomenally well. There was a high school girl, she used to miss 3 or 4 days of school every month with her period. After learning about clay, she never missed a day of school again, because when the pain would get bad, she would put a poultice on that side, cover it with fabric to hold it in place, and leave it there through the night. And the next day, she would go to school. It didn't stop the period. The period still, progressed normally as it should, but without that pain that would keep her home. So the hernia story is we had a son who in high school, he was a high school wrestler, and we learned that 16-year-old boys don't tell mom and dad about hernias until they're so bad that they can't get them back in.
Yeah.
And that's when we learned our son had this hernia. When it was popping out so bad and he was having trouble getting it back in, he came and told us. So we went to a doctor who specializes in laparoscopic hernia repair, hoping that he wouldn't miss the wrestling season as a junior in high school. Well, this doctor said if he were my son, we would operate in the morning. But he said, I know he's a wrestler. I know these boys think they're wrestling, their high school sports is important. So he said, get him a hernia belt and wear and see if he can get by till the end of wrestling season. But if it pops out in between, he said, you got to come quick because it could really be serious. Well, we got him a hernia belt that he wore every day, but we made him a clay burrito that he wore every night. Now, and I could even, so this clay, okay, so this clay burrito, what it is, it's a piece of cheesecloth or gauze, a 12-inch square piece of gauze, and you put a patty of clay, like mayonnaise or mustard, you put it on to where it's 1/2 or 3/4 inch thick and 4 or 5 inches in diameter, so just like a really generous hamburger patty in the center of this 12-inch square piece of gauze, and then you fold the excess gauze over on top of itself, so you've made a patty of clay wrapped in gauze. And then we call that a poultice. Sometimes we call it a burrito. He would put that down inside his shorts over the spot where the hernia had been popping out. In the morning, he would just reach in and take it out, and it would come out as a patty of clay, just like it went in. But it would be much drier. By morning, it had dried to the point of it was like Play-Doh. And so he would just open up the cheesecloth or the gauze and let that patty of clay fall out in the garbage can. And then we would wash the gauze and use it again. I'm very economical. We would wash the gauze and use it the next night. So every day he wore the hernia belt. Every night he wore the clay burrito or patty poultice on that spot. Well, it never did pop out again during that wrestling season. So he wore that burrito on that spot from mid-December until the first part of February at the end of the wrestling season. And by the end of the wrestling season, it had never hurt again. It had never popped out again. So we didn't go back to that doctor to have it fixed at the end of that wrestling season or at the end of the next year's wrestling season or the next year or the next year. That kid is an adult now and has never had that hernia fixed that should have been fixed the next day.
Dang, what a story. Okay, I love that one. I would never have thought to do that.
Now, will that help every hernia? No. Older man, there's a man in Pennsylvania, he had a hernia. He tried the burrito thing, and he said it helped for a long time, but as a 50-year-old man, he just wasn't, growing and new tissue like this 16-year-old boy. And so eventually he gave up. eventually he had surgery because, which was fine. We're not anti-doctor.
Yeah.
It was, having surgery for him was a whole lot simpler than, wearing a clay burrito for months every night.
Yeah. No, there's a place for all that. So
there is.
Great story. Okay. Well, the last one I wanted to go external was using it as a bath. And so give us a couple stories maybe, but what I thought was fascinating is just as much making sure we capture the idea of how to properly dispose of the water, in particular from a foot bath. So tell people about bathing with clay.
You bet. And again, we didn't come up with this on our own. 99% of what I know about clay, I've learned from other people. Mm-hmm. And the first situation, it was a guy in Illinois, a naturopathic doctor in Illinois, who told me that doing a clay bath, and for a clay bath, you want water as hot as you can stand, and 3/4 of a cup to maybe a cup of clay. And you soak for 35, 40 minutes. And he said doing that would detoxify people, pull the heavy metals or other toxins out through the skin, because he said your skin is actually your largest organ of elimination. So one time a lady called me and she said that she asked if the clay would get rid of heavy metals. And I said, well, I can't promise or prove anything, but I've heard that it does. And she said that she had had a case of shingles early in her life that had left a lot of nerve damage. And she said, now in my older years, I'm in pain all day, I'm in pain all night, I'm miserable 24/7. And I think if I could detoxify from the heavy metals, I would feel better. Well, we talked about doing a clay bath. She didn't have a tub, but she had a shower, only a shower. And I said, well, you can also do the same thing with a foot soaking your feet. And again, how did I learn about that? Well, a lady called me one time and she was telling me of all the wonderful things clay had done and for her and her family. And she mentioned food poisoning. And I said, when you use it for food poisoning, do you drink the clear water off the top of the clay, or do you stir it up and drink the whole thing? And we'll go into those details, Chrissy, when we talk about it.
We're coming up to it.
Yeah, but it came up. Anyway, I said, so which way do you drink it? The clear water off the top, or do you stir it up and drink the whole thing? And in a disgusted voice, she said, drink the clay? Yuck. We don't drink the clay. And I said, I thought you said it helped food poisoning. She said, oh, it does. She said, recently my family went out to a restaurant, all came home with food poisoning, and thanks to the clay, by the time we went to bed, it was over. And I said, how's the clay helping food poisoning if you're not drinking it? And she said, we soak our feet. And I said, what? She said, we soak our feet for food poisoning. And I said, lady, you know more about this clay than I do. Tell me. And she said, by soaking their feet in a foot bath, and with a foot bath, you still use hot water, but you only use 2 tablespoons of the clay. And she said, yeah, that's how we get rid of food poisoning, because it detoxifies the body through the feet. So when this lady told me that she had heavy metals, didn't have a tub, I said, well, you can soak your feet. Told her how. And she called back a few days later as excited as a kid on Christmas morning. She said, I'm sleeping through the night. I'm pain-free. I haven't felt this good for 10 years. Would you send us some literature that I can share with my friends here in the trailer park in St. George, Utah? And so we did. And then a few days later, she called me. She said, hey, I've been talking to a friend in California about the clay. Would you send her literature? And we did. And then she called a few days later and said, I've been talking to a friend in Oregon. Send her. We did. Well, a few days later, she called. And to be funny, I try to be funny at times. I said, who are we going to send it to today? And she said, what happens if you put clay on plants? And I thought, on plants? Where's this question coming from? And I said, it's good for them. I said, it's got a high mineral value or high mineral content. It'll remineralize your plants. I said, yeah, you can use it as foliar spray. You can stir it in the soil. I said, you bet, it's good for your plants. And in a tearful voice, sobbing, she said, oh, I should have known better. I should have known better. And I'm confused. I said, June, what's going on? And she said, well, here in our city, St. George, Utah, we're told we should conserve water. And I thought, what can I do with this water from soaking my feet? And she said, I came up with what I thought was a really good idea. I thought, I'll use it to water my houseplants. And all of my friends, I would tell them, soak your feet and then use it to water your houseplant. She said, I was talking to a friend today about the clay, or I was talking to my friend, and I said, every plant in my house has died. My friend said, hers aren't dead, but they're looking really sick. So we decided there must be something lethal in the clay to plants. And I said, no, there isn't. and now you know what you did, don't you? She said, yes, all the toxins, heavy metals that pulled out of us were in that water.
Yeah.
I said, you got it. That's right. A guy in Hawaii killed a section of his lawn from the water after soaking his feet. Now, full disclosure, I thought, wouldn't it be awesome in my clay class to show a picture of some flowers or my lawn that the clay had killed? Well, my wife's flowers are sacred. I didn't dare mess with them. But I thought, I can kill a section of my lawn and my wife will never know. And then I'll have a picture that I can show in my classes. So every time I would take water out our back door after soaking our feet, my wife would say, don't put that on the lawn. And I would say, got it, honey. And I would go out and put it on the lawn, same spot. Well, guess what? It never killed our lawn. And I think it's because my wife and I are not toxic enough because of other things we do. But anyway, so the point is, and Kristen, what you said, well, so if you do a foot soak, what do you do with the water? You can, or if you do a clay bath, what do you do? Can you let that go down your drain? Yes. Now, when we do a foot soak, in a little plastic hospital type basin, plastic dishpan, it's got 2 tablespoons of clay in it. We take that out and pour it on a gravel driveway. You can pour it on a gravel driveway. You can throw it across maybe a patch of weeds. I don't know if it'll kill weeds or not. Maybe weeds like toxins. But you can also flush that down the toilet if you don't have access to a gravel driveway you want to throw it on. Yeah. Tubs, we have put clay down our tub for 50 years. And it has never caused a problem. For the first 20 years, we were on a septic tank. Never caused a problem at all, because you take a cup of clay, by the time it's dissolved in a full tub of water, you open the drain and it goes down the drain lickety split. And there's not even enough sediment in the bottom to fill a quarter of a teaspoon. And so we have never in 50 years seen it a problem. Now, if you got a big glob of clay, well, don't force that down your sink. Don't force that down your drain. If you got a big glob of clay, like if you do a burrito, like we did for my son's hernia, or if you've got a wound and you got a big glob of clay, well, throw that in the garbage can. Yeah. But for the 2 tablespoons in a foot soak, for that cup of clay in a full body bath, it's gone down the drain and no problems.
Good to know. Well, I liked that story or that data point about everybody killing their houseplants, because it does say, I've heard people roll their eyes at the idea that you can detox through your skin. And that what you're saying is a testament to, yes, the body does purge things you don't want. And in the right environment, you can really disrupt life with the toxins coming out of people. So
for sure. My dad had an infection in his hand one time with a red streak all the way into the armpit. And they packed his hand in the clay, wrapped it with a handkerchief so it could dry, and he went to bed with a red line up his arm. He got up the next morning with no red line.
God.
So, yeah.
Cool. One thing I've heard you mention in the ways that you've used it, you said for women, and I couldn't figure out a reason for this. You say have them use clay that's more around the consistency of mayo or mustard, but for guys, often it's more like sheetrock mud. So why the difference? Or is there something there I missed? Or do you have a his and hers bottle around the house? Or
well, it's because it's just to help guys envision it. Okay. I mean, they're the same thing.
It's the same consistency. Mud. It's not different then. Okay.
No. Yeah, sheetrock mud and mayonnaise are basically the same consistency.
Got it. You're just speaking female versus male. Okay.
Exactly. Yeah.
Got it. All right. Well, let's talk internal uses of clay then, because there's some things that you've seen clay help internally. And again, your book has a longer list than some of these things. But here's some of the ways clay has been able to help internally. So colic, in case you don't know, that's where babies just can't seem to stop crying. Allergies and celiac disease, heartburn and hiatal hernias, H. pylori and ulcers, parasites, food poisoning, Crohn's, colitis, and diverticulitis, and then diarrhea and constipation. And that second one surprised me because I was familiar with clay for diarrhea, but I didn't even think of it as something that could help with constipation. So you've already mentioned a couple of stories along that vein of how you've had people use it for diarrhea and constipation. So tell us some more internal uses, maybe the food poisoning or how you recommend people use it internally.
So yeah, and let's tell them. We'll tell them how to use it, and then talk about what it's done.
Okay.
So to use the clay internally, it's just a teaspoon in a glass of water. And for those who are, do have the advantage of video, teaspoon in a glass of water. It doesn't really matter how much water. I like to use 8 or 10 ounces of water. Now, use the best water you've got. Some people, ask, well, does it need to be distilled water, purified water? We've never seen a water that clay doesn't work with. So use the best water you've got. Now, if you use distilled water or reverse osmosis water, be aware that the clay does act a little differently. When you put a teaspoon of clay and mixing clay and water, it doesn't mix well. It's like mixing flour and water.
Yeah, I was pleased to I didn't know this until I saw you teach it how to get it to actually mix well. So keep going.
Okay, so the hard way to do it is what we did for the first 30 years because we didn't know any better, and that is to take a teaspoon of the dry powdered clay, put it in a glass of water, and stir it. Now you don't want to use a metal spoon. Clay, the negative electronic charge that clay has, is destroyed when it's in contact with metal. So don't use a metal glass, don't use a metal spoon, use a plastic spoon to stir it. But we would put a teaspoon of the clay in a glass of water and we would stir it, and as best we could. Of course, the clay goes lumpy, it's like flour. It sticks to the spoon, it sticks to the glass, it goes lumpy, but we would just whip it up as best we could. And then if you need to drink clay, you just choke it down, lumps and all. If you don't need to drink it right then, the French homeopath, Raymond Dextre, he said that after you mix the clay and water, he actually recommended that you let it set 4 to 6 hours for the clay to activate the water or for the water to activate the clay. And after 4 to 6 hours, the clay sediment will be on the bottom, but the minerals will have dissolved into the water, and the water will have taken on the electronic charge that the clay has. So Dextre said after 4 to 6 hours of the clay just sitting, then most of the water will be clear. And you can drink the clear water off the top and throw the sediment away and get the same benefit as stirring it up and drinking the whole muddy mess. So for the first few years that we used the clay, we did that. We didn't drink any of the sediment. We would stir it up, we would let the sediment drop out, minerals into the water, electronic charge in the water, and then we would drink the clear water off the top and we would throw the sediment away. That's what we did for the first months, maybe years that we were using the clay. But after we learned how effective the clay was and that the sediment, wasn't harmful, then now we just, drink it all. But if you're using reverse osmosis water or distilled water, then the water will never clarify. It will stay murky. And again, it doesn't matter, but just be aware that if you're wanting the water to drop out and be clear, if you're using distilled or reverse osmosis water, it won't. Now, for you in the video audience, I've got a bottle of clay here, and I'll show you what I do now. Rather than using an open glass, I have a glass bottle. It was a kombucha bottle, glass bottle with a wide mouth lid. And I will fill it 3/4 full of water. So it's about 10, 12 ounces. And then I'll dump a teaspoon of clay in there. And I'll just dump it on the water and walk away. I don't stir it. I don't shake it. I just dump the clay on the water and walk away. And I let that clay sink down through the water by itself, undisturbed, for 2 or 3 hours or even overnight. Then when I stir it, it will stir as smooth as a glass of milk. And I'll even show you if you're watching this. So when you stir it, after it has sat for a few hours, it'll stir as smooth as a glass of milk with no lumps. And if you don't mind drinking the murky liquid, you can drink it right then, and you can't even detect any sediment going through your teeth. And if you close your eyes or use cold water, you can't even taste it. There is no taste. Now, Christian, have you tried it
Oh, I
yet?
haven't done it this way. I've always done the way that you like, this is how it's awful and it's chunky. But after seeing you do it, I'm like, that makes so much more sense. So,
Yes. So yeah, if you've let it set for a while and hydrate undisturbed before you stir it, it stirs as smooth as a glass of milk. And like I say, if you close your eyes, stand in a dark room, basically there's no taste. Now, my wife says, yes, there is. There's a mild earthy taste. And I'll give her
yeah,
that.
I would give her a fact check option on that one. That's
Yeah, there is a mild earthy taste. Uh, that's the easy way. So the easy way is to let the clay sink down through the water, hydrate by itself, then a few hours later stir, and either drink the clear water, well, drink the murky or let it sit again and it'll clarify and drink the clear water. So that's what you do for a glass at a time. Again, for the video audience, people can do a quart at a time. If you're doing a quart, it's a heaping tablespoon in a quart bottle. And basically, that's 4 servings of clay. So you could drink it, once a day for 4 days. Some people will drink the clay once a day. Some people will drink it twice a day. Some take it in the morning. Some take it at night. Some take it with food. Some take it on an empty stomach. There's really, it's more of an art than a science. So there's really not a bad way, to do it. But find out what works for you. My friend who had ulcers, he said it helped better if you took it at night. But other people will take it at other times during the day. So very flexible.
love it.
Whatever.
It's so wise to just say your body's different than other people's, and your exposures and your health history and hydration levels and sleep and hope and all of that is. So yeah, have the willingness to experiment. I interviewed Herb Richards and he said the exact same thing about DMSO. Like you got to find your way, and you don't find it without running some experiments on your body and seeing how you respond to it. And so I like that flexibility you're talking about with, just have some courage to start.
Yeah. I did make a mistake once. So I guess there is a mistake you can make with clay.
Okay. Tell us.
The clay is phenomenal for food poisoning. It really is. And I can say that even with diarrhea, for the first 20 years, I never took the clay twice for the same case of diarrhea.
Wow.
It was, basically almost instantaneous. But there was one time I'd gotten some food poisoning from something, and boy, I had some nausea, and I was just ready to throw up. I thought, boy, I'm gonna be throwing up here in the next 5 minutes, and I don't like to throw up, so I thought, well, I'm gonna drink clay instead of throwing up. Well, I drank clay. That settled things to where I couldn't throw up. So whatever was down there that had been churning, wanting to come out, it was still churning. It couldn't come out, but it still churned, and it churned for quite a while. And in hindsight, I thought, if ever again, I'm at the point where I'm ready to upchuck, and I feel like I'm going to upchuck within the next few minutes, then I would rather upchuck, get that out of there, and then drink clay.
Yeah.
Rather than drink the clay and keep that in there. But for any other case of food poisoning, unless regurgitation is minutes away, drink clay and it resolves it. I've never had a case of food poisoning go past an hour or two.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. A couple of years ago, we were at an event. They served some chicken, and I brought some chicken home. The chicken they served that night was fine, but the chicken I brought home the next day, I realized I brought some bad pieces home. My wife said, don't eat them. I thought, they'll be fine. I ate them. I shouldn't have.
Yeah.
And thanks to the clay, before I went to bed that night, food poisoning was history.
Very nice. Okay. Well, 2 other things that we should maybe give people some window into is one, using clay relative to timing of medications, and then the other is constipation. So give people some guide rails around those 2 things.
You bet. Now, regarding constipation, do you mean to get rid of constipation, or
I'm talking about, potentially using too much and giving yourself constipation.
Okay. Yes. Right. So the normal amount of clay, like is a teaspoon a day or twice a day. You can go. I know people do it 3 times a day. My feeling is, if taking clay 3 or 4 times a day, if that doesn't solve your problem, the clay is probably not the solution. But if you take too much clay, it can cause constipation, which is ironic because, again, I know people who've been so constipated. Well, in fact, I'll tell you, I know people who've been so constipated, they've been having one bowel movement every week or 10 days. And 3 days of clay, their bowels are normal. We had a grandson many years ago who his mother was no longer able to nurse him. So he was put on a formula. And the side effect of that formula was constipation, which is totally normal. And the doctors were having them shove suppositories up his little rectum. When we heard that they were shoving suppositories up his little bottom, we said, hey, you can't do that on our grandkids. It's okay if you do that on other people's grandkids, but not on our grandkids. So we had the parents mix the clay, a teaspoon in a glass of water, like they were going to drink it themselves, to let the clay settle out, and then use the water off the top to mix the formula. As soon as he got formula made with the clay water, his little bowels kicked in and no problems. But, and most people can take, like say, 2, 3, 4 teaspoons a day with no problem. One lady thought, well, if a teaspoon or 2 a day, if a teaspoon a day is good, then 9 teaspoons a day is 9 times better. So she was taking 9 teaspoons a day. Yeah, it made her constipated. So just like, if you take too much vitamin C, your body lets you know by giving you diarrhea. Yep. If you take too much clay, your body lets you know by making you constipated. So that's the word on the constipation. The
other one was medication. So
oh yes, okay. So the clay, because of this negative electronic charge that is beneficial for pulling out toxins, poisons, heavy metals, free radicals, and such, if it recognizes a medication as a toxic poison, it will absorb it out. Now, Dextrate, when he wrote the book back in the 1950s, he addressed this issue, and he actually said, if you're on a medication, don't take clay, because the clay could interfere with the medication, or the medication could interfere with the clay. So he said, finish your medication and then take clay. Well, that was fine in the 1950s when people were on a drug for, a week or 10 days, and then they were off. Well, in our society today, we have people who are on lifetime drugs. If they wait until they're off their medication, they'll be 6 feet under the ground and the funeral will be over.
Yeah, right.
So people who are on daily, lifetime medications, what we have found is that for most of those, if you take them, the clay and the medication, 2 or 3, 4 hours apart, there's no problem. Except in one incident. There's only one incident where we have seen that even 12 hours apart is a problem, and that is with the drug thinner, or the
blood thinner.
The blood thinner Coumadin. If there was a fellow in Pennsylvania who was on Coumadin because of an accident he had, and he was on a blood thinner, and he was concerned because he knew the clay could pull out, toxic medications, and so he was taking them 3 or 4 hours apart. He went to the doctor, have his Coumadin level tested. They said, "Why aren't you taking your Coumadin?" And so then he went to taking them 12 hours apart. And the next time he went in for his Coumadin level, they said, "You're still not taking your Coumadin." Well, you can't take them further apart than 12 hours. And so in his situation, because your blood being too thick can it can be life-threatening, then he chose it was better to take the Coumadin and not take the clay. Now, there's other people. I know there was a friend who was on warfarin. It's a blood thinner. And he was taking warfarin as a blood thinner, but he was always also taking clay 2 or 3 times a week, not daily, but 2 or 3 times a week for heartburn. And taking the clay 2 or 3 times a week, it did not negatively affect his warfarin.
Yeah.
So again, It's a personal, individual situation.
Right.
One fellow, he was taking Synthroid for his thyroid, and he was also began taking clay for his heartburn. And life was good when he was taking them apart, but he decided to simplify his life and use the clay water to swallow the Synthroid.
Uh-oh.
His Synthroid immediately quit working.
Yeah.
He went back to taking them a few hours apart. The Synthroid worked, and the clay resolved his heartburn.
Nice. Have you ever seen anybody with psych meds take clay, and any guidelines around that? Medications for the head, psychiatric medications?
No stories.
No stories about that one. Okay. So
no stories. Again, yeah. If it were me, I would take them as 3 or 4 hours apart, at least.
Okay.
But if in doubt, if it's a medication that without it could be life-threatening, I wouldn't take clay.
Yeah. Okay. Good advice there. So as always, get to know your own body, find somebody that can help you with it, and there you go. Okay. I've got a few minutes left, but I want to wrap up with just, is there any other mysterious illnesses that you've seen clay help where you're like, I didn't even think that it would impact this? Where, like, I don't know if it's insomnia or any other strange things that people have healed from.
I'm glad you brought that up, because there are times when people will come to me and they'll say, will clay help this? Will clay help that? Things that I've never even heard about. So I tell people, if it were me, I would do 3 things. I would drink it. I would take it internally, because often even external issues are internal issues coming out.
Right.
I would put it on topically, wherever there's an owie, if there's a pain, if there's an itch, if there's a wound, if there's a redness, if there's inflammation, wherever there's an indication as to where to put it topically, I would put it on topically. And the third thing I would do is I would bathe in it, either full body bath or soak the feet. So if I had some issue, I would do all 3 things. There are people that come back and say, wow, it helped this, it helped that. Now, you mentioned insomnia. I don't have any insomnia stories. I don't have enough weight loss stories to,
right.
Mention weight loss. There are some that have said it has helped, but again, not enough stories.
What about things like lipomas, skin tags, or moles? Have you seen anything where it helps with those?
No. Okay. Now, growths, what do you call them? Tumors?
Mm-hmm.
Or, what's it? Oh, abscesses.
Okay.
Abscesses or growths. Yes. As far as scars, if old scars, I don't have any stories of the clay helping old scars. Now, new scars, or if the wound, if there's still healing to be done, I would use the clay.
Right.
But old scars, baldness, ugliness, if it helped ugliness, I wouldn't look like this.
Yeah, right. You would be the handsomest guy in the world if you could.
Yeah.
Who knows more about clay? Okay, well, let's wrap up. Show people your book there. So for people that are listening and can't read that, so he has a book called We Eat Clay and We Wear It Too. And the subtitle is A User's Guide of Practical Tips and Techniques to Improve the Healing Results of Natural Clay. And I can say it's a very approachable book. It's 42 pages. It's a great mix of why and how and some really inspiring stories. And so tell people where they can find your book, where they can find you, how to reach out.
Okay. You're going to like my email. Is weeatclay@gmail.com.
There you go.
My website.
It's also weeatclay.com, I believe.
Yeah, weeatclay.com is my website. The website's very simple. Basically, what you can get there is a PDF copy of the book for $6. The book does have a link to the class I teach on YouTube, where you can go and watch a class. It also has a list of mistakes you can make, because there are mistakes you can make.
Yep.
And a lot of times when I teach my class, I get so excited telling people all the things the clay can do, I forget to tell them, hey, there are some mistakes.
Yeah.
And so they're listed in the back of the book.
Yeah, we can only fit so much in one episode, people.
Right.
So there's more to learn. And I don't know how many people I can sit down with who've been studying one topic and worked at Mastery for 50 years. So it's so cool to be able to hang out with you.
for people who don't want the PDF, electronic PDF version, I do mail out hard copies so people can email me, send me an email, and I can tell them how they can get a hard copy.
Right on. All right, Neal. Well, you are a wealth of information and fascinating stories. So thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today. It has been an honor.
Well, I hope it helps people the way it's helped my family, and that's why I do this. I was blessed. God was very gracious to bring it into our lives and bless our lives. All 8 children came into a home where clay was there. They've all been benefited from clay. And so I want to help other people benefit the way I was.
Well, it's an honor to amplify your work and help some other people find some really simple, inexpensive solutions. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Christian.
Thanks for listening to Deconstructing Conventional. If this conversation sparked new questions or helped you see things in a new light, feel free to share it with a friend who is on a similar journey. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode and a perspective that challenges the norm. Check us out on our website at healingunited.today and find us on social media at Healing United, or you can check out the Healing United PMA app. It's a great way to stay connected. Remember, question everything and rebuild intentionally.